Hi, I am going to take a few minutes. I'm going to show you how to use Photopea. Photopea is a really great web-based photo editing software program. It is very similar to Photoshop, but it is free and you don't have to download it to your computer. So that is fantastic. The only thing that you're probably going to have to deal with, since it is free, you're going to have to deal with some of the ads that you see on the right side of my screen over here. So if you can just ignore those, pretend like they're not there, this is going to be a fantastic program for you. I like it almost as much as Photoshop, and in some ways it is more user-friendly than Photoshop. But for our double exposure project, I'm going to show you a few of the tools and things that we're going to need to use. So the first thing I'm going to point out is the toolbox here on the left. And here's what I want you to understand too. You may not know what all these tools are, but it's unlikely that you will ever have a project where you're going to use every single one of these tools. That's just not the case. So what we're going to do today, just to get started, I'm going to show you just a few of the tools that we will be using just to work on this project today. So the first one is this arrow key that you see right here. This is your move tool. This is going to allow you to grab parts of your image and move it around where you need to. Right here, this one right here is your cropping tool, and I'm going to show you how we're going to use that. If you come down just a little bit further, this is your eraser tool, and one of the things you'll notice is if at the bottom right-hand corner of these, if you see a little mark down there and you kind of hover over that and click on it, it allows you to pull down more menus. So you can see this is the eraser tool and the background eraser tool. These are kind of fun to use. You certainly don't have to use it for your double exposure, but it is really fun. Now, once you get more comfortable with this program and you want to learn how to do some more advanced things, this is your pen tool. It looks like a calligraphy nib, and if you hover over that, it allows you to cut parts of images out of your picture. Like I said, that's more advanced, so we're not going to do that today, but that's definitely a fun thing to practice with. Now, if you come up here to the top, this is your file where you're going to pull out, if you're going to open up new images, you're going to create new files. This is something really neat that I like about Photopea, and it's not highlighted right now because I don't have an image open, but there is an open in place. So not only will it open a file for you, but it will place it into another picture. So that's a really cool option that you have. Up here we have our edit, so if you mess things up, you can always go to undo or step backward. We have our cut, copy, paste, and this is a great one. This image right here up at the top, this menu allows you to make a lot of adjustments. So it will allow you to adjust your photo just in general, your brightness and contrast, curves, exposure, hue, saturation. It'll allow you to convert your pictures to black and white if you want. So there are definitely some fun things you could do right here just to enhance your photos. If you want to change the actual size of your image, you can go to image size. So this is where it would allow you to change the pixel size of your picture. You may find that you need to do that. Now, something that's really important that I want to point out to you that we will be using, this is going to be the layers palette over here on the right side of your screen. The layers palette is going to be very helpful, and I'll explain what we'll do with that later. So first thing we need to do, we're going to create a new project. So I'm just going to click on new project. And what I really like about Photopea, there are some templates here on the right side. We're not going to be using these templates because we're going to be creating something just on our own that is completely different. It also gives you an option to create things if you want to for specific purposes, like if you're going to create something for social media, it allows you, kind of gives you a preset size and template for that. So that's really cool that it does that. Again, we're not going to need that today. So we're going to create a new project, and I'm just going to call this one double exposure. I'm setting it for 8 by 10. Now, when you open this up, it may want to set it as the default as pixels. So it'll read it in pixels. I like to think of things visually. If I were actually going to print this, how big would I want it? So I'm going to set this for inches just because it's easier for me to understand. And I'm going to set it for a DPI of 300. So if it's something that you're going to print, a DPI of 300 would be great. If it is something that you're simply going to upload to Instagram, you're going to put on social media, maybe put on a website, it's going to be preset to 75 and you could leave it at 75. So if it's something for the internet, 75 dots per inch are perfect, but if it's something that you're going to be printing, I would say go no smaller than 300 dpi. The background gives you several options. You could have a white background, transparent. I'm going to choose transparent. Because I'm working with a double exposure, I like having that idea of making sure that my background is transparent. And if I wanted to cut things out, I can. Now, all you have to do from there is hit create, and what's really nice is it gives you this format already. So it has that in place for you. Now, let's go over to the layers palette. This is something I want you to remember to do, and there's a reason why it will be helpful to you. But the first thing I want you to do, I want you to make a duplicate of your background. You always want to have one background layer that is untouched. So I'm going to right click, pull out the menu, and I'm just going to hit duplicate layer, and it's just giving me an extra background copy. It will become helpful if you make mistakes and you have to go back and change some things. It also allows you a little more flexibility when you are trying to paste several layers in there. So when you're working with several layers, it's very helpful. Now, there's a couple of things that we could do. There's some different ways we could bring in our images, and I'm going to show you both ways just so you can see it. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go to File, Open, and Place. And like I said, I love it that it will bring it right in for you and bring that image in. So I've got a photo here of my two kids from the Florida Keys. They're good buddies. Now all I do is I take and I just kind of drag at the corner and I pull it down. And then hit enter. And that kind of seals it in place. Now I want to bring in another image from my double exposure. So here's another cool thing you can do. If you want to work with multiple windows, it allows you to see all the pictures that you could possibly bring in, and you can just drag them over. So I'm going to take this picture of just the water here, and I'm going to drag it over. Now you can see that I can stretch it so that it fills up the entire space. Again, hit enter just to seal it in place, and voila, there we go. It's sealed in place. Now the area where I stretched it and it goes beyond that canvas there, you're just not going to simply see that. We know it's there, but you're not going to see it. So now we have our layers palette, and I want you to think about creating double exposures or working with layers. Kind of think about it like making a sandwich where you have several layers going on. And the nice thing about this layers palette, the things that you can do is you can take, if you want to, and you can move your layers around. So if I wanted the layer with my kids to be on the top, I can just simply move it, and that's what's on top. Another thing that you can do if you want to see some layers and not others, so if you want to work specifically on a certain layer, like let's say, for example, I want to go back and I want to work on that layer with the waves. I can turn the eye off there, and it allows me to just simply see this layer here, but it doesn't get rid of it. It just allows you to turn certain layers off. So that's a really nice feature that it has. Now, because I'm making a double exposure, that means that you've got two images over top of each other where you can see both images. It doesn't mean you're seeing both images equally, it just means that you can see a little bit of both images. So here's the important thing that you're also going to be working with. This is your opacity right here. It is set for 100, meaning that they are completely, both of these images, the waves I have here, oops, and the one of my kids, these are completely 100% opaque. Now, if I want to make one of them more transparent so you can see one a little bit better than the other, you're going to change the opacity, and it has a dial here, and then it shows you the percentage. So you can kind of play around with it to see how opaque you want to make it so that you can see the layer beneath it. Now, this is important too. You've got to make sure that you're working on, you've clicked on the layer that you want to change. So if I want to manipulate this, the opacity of this layer, I've got to make sure that I have that one selected. And I'm going to bring it down to, let's see what it looks like. Even at 67%, I don't know that I want to go any lighter than that because I'm going to lose the kids here in that one. So I think for this one, a 67% opacity for this top layer would be great. Now I could always switch it up, and I'm just going to show you quickly what that looks like. If I move the waves on the top, kids are on the bottom, and then I change the opacity of the water, I like that one just as much. So it really just depends on what you want to do. Now, here's something that's kind of fun that I like. You can, if you want to, come over to your eraser, and you can adjust your eraser size up here at the top. So there's a dial here, and it allows you to adjust how many pixels you want your eraser to be. So if you go a little bit higher, you can see the small circle here. That gives you the diameter of your eraser. And it allows you different types of erasers too, like you could create different effects. You can see it a little bit better there. That's kind of cool. I think we're going to just play with that just to see what that's like. So now what I can do is I can come over here to the water and erase parts of the water. Where my kids are so that you notice them a little bit more, but the waves still stay in the sky. That's kind of cool. Still kind of keeping it subtle. So by erasing part of this top layer, and I'm going to turn the eye off on this one so you can see what I did. You can see where parts of the waves were erased, and if I change the opacity, I bring the opacity way up, you can see where parts of the waves were actually erased here. Now I'm going to take that opacity, change it back down, bring it back down. I think it was somewhere around there. Turn the eye here, and then you've got your double exposure. It's really, really fun, and Photopea is a super easy, user-friendly program. Now, one last thing I want to show you before we finish up here, and I could spend a lot more time working on this, but we're going to finish up just so you can see how this needs to work. If I'm going to come back into this and I'm going to continue working on this, then I'm going to want to save this as a PSD file. But let's say I'm finished with it, I'm ready to turn it in, then I'm going to save it as a JPEG. So then you're going to go to File, Export As, and this is what's really cool. It allows you to export it in a lot of different ways. I'm going to export it as a JPEG file because that's going to make it a lot easier to upload it to Canvas if it's a JPEG file. If you want to come back in and you want to work on it, really, really important that you save it as a PSD file, because once you save it as a JPEG, it takes all of these layers here and it flattens these layers. So you can't go back in and change the layers once you've saved it as a JPEG. If you may want to come back in and work on it, but you know you need to go ahead and turn this in, save it both ways. Save it first as a PSD file, then go in and save it as a JPEG file. So I wanted to make sure that you knew the difference between those, and just know that once you save it as a JPEG, and I'll show you here, once you save it as a JPEG, that it will absolutely bind all of these layers together, and you will not be able to come back in and work on these individual layers again. So that's important to note. I hope you have a lot of fun with this double exposure and really experiment, have fun with playing with some of these fun tools.